Okay, now let's step into a new way of thinking about AI design again. We talk about accessibility, right? I'm Ro Project Sarma, and it isn't just a add-on. It's like a foundation. Accessible हुनु भनेको चाहिँ foundation जस्तो भइसक्यो. From the ways we interact to the system, to the clarity of the responses, to the fairness driving the algorithm, inclusive AI is about breaking boundaries and building trust. Taking us deeper into this discussion is none other than Jayashree Nagrale. And despite her medical issues, she came all the way here to give us this talk. So let's welcome her with a big round of applause, Jayashree Nagrale.
Hello, good evening. Am I audible to the folks in the back? Yeah, awesome. Abhas, amazing talk. I hope you all have taken photos of the slides that he has shown, because he has given you a step-by-step framework of what to learn, how do you process or how do you divert your thinking so that you can work with AI. He has given you a list of tools to start using, and then he has also shown a demo of how even a designer can build an agentic system. So what he has laid out for you is fantastic, and that is what, it is similar to what we have been getting trained on at Microsoft as well. So thank you, Abbas, again. Okay. So my name is Jayashree. I am a senior product designer at Microsoft. I come from Hyderabad, India. I have about 15 years of work experience. I've worked with corporates, small-scale startups. I don't have a design education per se. I have a master's in technology. I learned design by myself, and I'm here. Not saying this to boast about myself, but saying this as an encouragement for you to let us know that it's not too late to start fresh. It's not too late to learn new tools. Okay, so to start with, this talk will be a little bit serious. It's going to be discussing about accessibility in AI design and how, as designers and as engineers, we can create inclusive AI systems. A brief overview of our time together. We will discuss what the problem is. We'll discuss what the opportunities for us are. We will discuss I'll make it like really simple for you, okay? So 3 pillars on how you can think. I will leave you with an AI toolkit that you can immediately go and start using in your teams. And then maybe I'll also leave you with an opportunity on how you can be a change in your organizations. So let's start with understanding the current state of AI at work. So AI, as you know, has been rapidly growing, rapidly being adopted as well. And currently, over 63% of professional developers use AI in their development process. Engineers in this room, what have you replaced Stack Overflow with? GitHub Copilot? Yeah, ChatGPT. And you're not alone, right? Almost 63% of engineers are doing this as of today. Almost 78% of organizations use AI in at least one work, in a small business function. Now, this is not clashing with the slide that you saw earlier. What Abhas presented was about the workflows. And this stat is for a workflow of a small business function. But having said that, the ServiceNows, the Atlassians, and all the big companies in the world are building workflows, so it's going to come in sooner than expected. And more than 75% of knowledge workers use AI, and this number has doubled in the last 6 months alone. So what we are seeing by these numbers is that more and more people are adopting AI. They are not just adopting AI to maybe generate an image for their kid's birthday party, but they are also actively using it in their work. But then what's the problem? There are a couple of problems with AI, but the problems that we are going to be discussing here about accessibility. So from the 7-point-something billion people on this planet, 1.3 billion people have some form of disability. That is about 16% of the global population. And to put that in context, let's imagine that you divide yourself in groups of 6. One person in that group of 6 will have some form of disability. Now, when I say disability, it does not mean a broken limb or a non-functional body part or loss of vision. Disabilities can come in many different shapes, sizes, and forms. It can be physical, something you can see. It can be mental, it can be emotional. It can be cognitive, like dyslexia. It can also be situational, like say, for example, a parent holding a baby and cooking with one hand. So at that point in time, she doesn't have the other hand to work for her. So disabilities can come in many shapes and forms. And unless we are inclusive and we think about these different forms of people who are using AI, and unless we are actively building systems that include these usages, we are going to be, if we don't do that, we are going to be excluding 1.3 billion people from using our systems. Now, I'll give a story to bring home this point, right? So let's say he's Naveen. He's a fictional character, but there are millions of Naveens like this out there. He's an amazing software engineer. He uses screen readers to code, and his team has recently adopted AI. And they are doing like really good, right? But there's a problem. The AI tool that they are using is not screen reader friendly. So that means everyone else in Naveen's team is able to use AI for coding, whereas he is going to be left out for no fault of his, right? And it's not just engineers. It can be many different people in many different job functions. Think of a person who stammers, and maybe there is an AI interview app. How would that score him? Think of a student with dyslexia or ADHD, and maybe in his classroom he is given an iPad with an AI-generated or AI-assisted learning system, right? So will it behave the same way as it behaves with other children? No, because our data sets don't account for these type of use cases yet. So again, designers, we love our how might we problems. So the question that we would be answering in this next 20, 25 minutes is how might we build AI systems that adapt to different forms of usage rather than forcing people to use it in one particular way. So how might we design AI that adapts to human diversity instead of forcing conformity? So again, I said I would make it super simple. So to answer that how might we question, we will be thinking in these lines. So we will think about the 3-pillar framework first. That will help us guide our thinking process. I will leave you with a toolkit. We'll have an implementation plan of how we can use it in our teams and our products. And then a little bit we'll discuss about the org. So let's start with the 3-pillar framework. Now, I want you to picture a box, right? A black box. That is the AI system, okay? And humans and other agents currently interact with that particular box by giving it some form of inputs. Now, that input can come from a human, that input can come from another agentic system. But there are some inputs being fed into that box. And that box does some algorithm magic, and it produces some output. Basically, that's it. In a nutshell, that's how AI systems work, right? There is input, there is some algorithm, and there is output. If we want to think about accessibility, we should also start thinking in these 3 phases. How can we build more inclusive input systems? How can we build fair algorithms that go in the box? And how can we build more inclusive output systems? So those 3 are our 3 pillars. And each of these 3 pillars has 3 simple steps that you can use. To start with input, right? There are a lot of things that can go inside, but to get started, just consider these 3 things. So first thing, as designers, when you get your spec from your PMs and product managers, usually it will be request for a new product, it will be request for a new feature. So at that point, we as designers are advocates for our users, right? So within your team, you are the voice of the user. So when you get a spec, you have to, or at least you try to advocate that, hey, why are we only relying on a keyboard input? Why not we even have a voice input? So a multimodal form of inputs that will help people with disabilities. Second thing, design for input recovery and error flows. Let's take the example of the parent holding a baby in one hand and cooking in the kitchen. And she's asking Alexa to play something. And because it's a noisy environment, the Alexa has not heard clearly, right? So at that point, what does she do? The Alexa, I mean. So she asks, so generally she says that, hey, I couldn't hear you, can you please repeat it? So that is an error flow that they have designed, so that if the input was not clear, what should the system do? Should the system go off and, give some random output, or should the system recover from that error and ask for that input again? So that is what I mean by designing intelligent recovery flows. And the third one is super important. When you test your products, right? I mean, all of our products do some form of usability testing before they go out into the world. So at that point, if you have 10 participants, make sure that at least 2 or 3 of them are from that disability cohort. So that way, you're also being inclusive of how you test it. And trust me, the results and the insights that these folks will give you will develop a new form of empathy in you, and that's like super important. So 3 simple things you can do for input accessibility. One is always advocate for a of different types of inputs. Don't just rely on one. Second one is design good recovery error flows. And the third one is test with different abled users, not just like normal fully able users, but test it out with people who are differently abled as well. Okay, any questions in the input? Cool, so now in that 3-step, we spoke about the input. Now we will speak about the output ones. The first thing is, now AI is designed to be intelligent, right? That's why it's called intelligence. And it is very easy for the AI to start giving jargons and giving like complex things that nobody understands. So as designers, we can advocate for the AI responses to be simple, and that is easily doable. So what the engineers do is that they have a prompt running in the background that tells the agent on how to respond. So if you can work with your engineers and tell them that to program the AI in such a way that the prompt needs to be easy and simple and clear to understand, that would help a lot of users. Making something simple is difficult, and making something complex is easy. The second thing, and I am the best example of this, is to create a multisensory IA. So in the previous presentation, he was speaking in Nepali. And though it's a beautiful language, it sounds like music, I don't understand it. So for that duration of the presentation, I was amongst that disability cohort because I was not able to understand it. So cognitive disability, right? But what did he do? His slides were in English. He was giving me 2 ways of consuming information. One is visual through English, one is auditory through Nepali. And because I had these 2 options, I could understand what he was saying. So when your AI system is giving outputs, also make sure that it is not just in one format, but it also covers multiple senses. So for example, if your AI output is giving a video, make sure that there are transcripts with it, make sure that there are timestamps, make sure that there's a search bar, so on and so forth. Yeah, the third one is pretty simple to do, and I think all of us are already doing that. Think about designing for modes, right? There are different modes. You have this light mode and dark mode and everything on your phone, right? So similarly, we can have modes for AI system. We can have focus modes. We can have browsing modes. Remember in Netflix, when you're browsing, you see so many thumbnails. But when you have chosen one, it just zooms out and it shows you only that one thing. It gets your focus on that particular thing that's playing, right? So those are modes. Think about how you can use these modes in your products as well. So 3 things for input, 3 things for output, and now we will see how do we build that algorithm fairness. Again, 3 things for that as well. Okay, have you heard or have you seen an iPhone unlocking with face recognition? Yeah? So there is this lady called, okay, I think it's the perfect thing for what I'm going to say. So iPhone face recognition doesn't work for people with darker skin tones, which currently all of us are now. So once the phone was launched and once people with darker skin tones started using it, what they have discovered is that it did not work. It did not even unlock for people with darker skin tones. And there's a lady called Joy who kind of fought against the system and advocated for an inclusive data set. So what I'm trying to say is that the AI system learns from the data you give it, right? If the data you give it is biased, it is going to give you an biased output. So if you can make sure that the data you feed into it has different forms of skin tones, age, gender, anything that you are feeding into it, make sure it has diversity, make sure it is inclusive, and then the output also will reflect the same. We were on point number 1 for algorithm fairness. Point number 2 is transparent decision making, and I hope this will come out sooner. Okay, so when I was traveling, when I came today to Kathmandu, I asked Perplexity that I'm in Kathmandu for 1 day, give me an itinerary for what to do on a Sunday. And then it gave me like a list of things to do and a list of places to go visit and a list of things to eat. And somehow I felt that was like too generic and it was not tailored to me. So if AI can tell users why it has made a certain recommendation or why it has made a certain decision, right? That is called AI transparency. AI transparency. So AI transparency is where the AI gives you a solution, but also tells you why it has given that solution. So if Perplexity or any other LLM had told me, hey Jayashree, I know you're a vegetarian, you like shopping, don't like spicy food, you don't like walking too much, and here I have composed a list of things for you to do, that would have felt more personalized to me. So first thing is make sure your data set is inclusive. Second thing is make sure the AI also gives reasons why it has given that particular data. And the third thing is always make sure that you take user feedback. Remember that thumbs up, thumbs down button that you see under every response? That is intentionally placed there because once AI goes out into the world, the best people to train it are its users. And as designers, if we provide that kind of feedback mechanism, it will help AI improve over time. So we saw the 3-pillar framework, right? Input, algorithm fairness, and output. And now the toolkit. So now I'll quickly walk through this, but here are some tools that you can use in your teams to make sure that the products that you develop are accessible and inclusive. The first one is pre-development, that is where the design comes in. Second is dev. Third one is post-release. So in pre-development, we use a checklist that we have from the WCAG group. We also use, we have like a proper Microsoft standards of inclusivity. We use that heavily as well. During development, we rely heavily on Axe, Chrome extensions, and browser tools to do its checks. It works wonderfully, by the way. Screen readers, JAWS, if you're on Mac or PC, you have inbuilt screen readers, so use that. Post-release, make sure that your products have some form of analytics and monitoring. See if people are giving lots of thumbs down or thumbs up. And that is the way you kind of continuously train that AI. Here is the thing if you want to take a screenshot. Okay. Now comes the juicy part, right? Now I will take you a little bit into how we as a team at Microsoft add the AI-based processes into our product development process. And since I am a designer, I am specifically going to focus on what we do as designers. There is a lot of things that PMs do, there's a lot of things that engineers do, but since we are designers and I am one too, I'm just going to focus on what we do. So when we are doing design explorations, we carefully consider if that particular component is going to be keyboard accessible. For example, if you were to design a drag and drop interface, right? Drag and drop, which are primarily a mouse function. How do you drag and drop using keyboards? Right, so drag and drops primarily happen using mouse, but if a person doesn't have a hand, they can't really use a mouse. So how is that going to be possible using a keyboard? So those are the things that we consider while designing components. We also have a very strong design system. If any one of you is into designing or creating design systems, one thing that you can do is make sure that everything has proper contrast, proper text ratios, proper alt text and everything. And during design handoffs, right? Now handoff is where we give to the engineering. So we just don't give a Figma frame with that particular website or web page design in it. We give like 4 different versions of it. First version will have how the website looks. Second version will have how that website or web page looks in 3 themes: light theme, dark theme, high contrast theme. The third section will have how that web page behaves when you navigate with a keyboard, with tab, what happens when you press tab, what happens when you press enter, space. Every keyboard interaction is documented. The fourth section will have that same frame, but with screen readers. What should a screen reader speak when they are reading that particular web page? So we just don't give 1, but we give 4. And we have another layer on top of it. There is a third-party team who has to approve this particular Figma before it goes to the engineering. So there is a third-party team that cross-checks that whatever we have given is correct, and then it goes to the engineering. So that is the kind of checks and balances we have. Because think about it, right? If the scale at which Microsoft operates is huge, we are touching like millions of lives, and having this type of balances is like really, it's tedious, yes, but it's also important. During development, the engineering do have their own list of checks and balances, but this is something that we do alongside engineering. We do bug bashes with them. Once they are done with the code, we check if the zooms are working, like 200% zoom, how does that look? Does it overflow? We check it in if the labels are properly written or not. And lastly, we do have bug bashes. Now, this is interesting. This is where the whole team comes in, the PMs, engineering, design, and that third-party team. and they come in and they try to identify bugs. And one strong requirement is that we have to solve all severity 0 and severity 1 bugs. Only then the product. So that is how seriously we take accessibility here. Now, think about it, right? I did not just wake up one day and say, you know what, Microsoft, go do this step. This is a system that was created by someone much before me, and it had started from one particular person, right? Now, I'm asking you, if you don't have a similar system in your product or in your company, can you be the one to start that? Probably not at a big scale like this, but can you at least start a small seed, plant a small seed of that inclusivity thought process in your organization? And it doesn't even have to be like huge, right? All you have to do is build out a small process, spread it across your teams, and then get your PMs and engineers on board with that. It's probably not happening, but okay. Okay, I'll just read out this question. I have 2 last slides for you, not bore you further. But 2 last questions and food for thought. One is, think about an AI system that you use every day. It could be ChatGPT, it could be Canva, Figma, Make, whatever. Think about it, think about that one AI system. And now close your eyes and think about how you would use it if you could not see it, right? Would you be facing difficulties? Would you be going about it with the same ease? Because there are 16% of the world's population who do that day in and day out, and their job depends on it, right? So if there is one takeaway that you can do, if there's only one thing that you remember from this presentation, is that when you go back to work on Monday, think about the product that you're working on and how you can solve one AI problem from there, how you can solve that, and try to solve it. Right? If all of us can remove one AI bug from each of our products, the whole world of workplaces will be much, much different. Okay, so thank you for being so patient. And I know the topic of AI is a little heavy, but again, thank you for your cooperation. I'll be happy to take questions.